How do you envision all of this scaling up in Singapore, given the size of nation that we are, right?
First thing is not to be thinking about it. And I mean that sort of counterintuitively. Right. The more we fixate, and one of the things that I don't try to use is I don't invoke the little red dot description. Because to me, that is a limitation, right? I understand the context in which it was used, but when we think about building, nobody in Israel builds for Israel. Nobody in San Francisco is building for Northern California. So I don't spend 5 minutes thinking about what can we do to build for Singapore. What we need to do is build for a much bigger market, set of markets, whether it's Southeast Asia or broadly Asia or parts of the world. And it's inevitable that if we build for those markets, Singapore will also be a good market. Yeah. But it's not obvious that it's the other way around. If we build for Singapore, it doesn't mean that it will be relevant in other markets automatically. So we don't want to think about our size. I've never met anybody in visits to Tel Aviv that said, gee, we're not a big place, what are we going to do? Yeah. There's an automatic assumption of, well, we're not a big place, so let's build for other big places, and that would be my suggestion. So we think about the talent that we need, we think about the capabilities that we need, we think about the outcomes we're trying to achieve, and then we set our sights on that. Where we do have challenges would be on some of the inputs for example, AI. If you need tens of thousands of images, as an example, to train and test an algorithm, then getting access to that may be harder for us than it would be if we were in another market. Yeah. But that's solvable.
I think we've got all the things going for us. We've got infrastructure, we've got access to, maybe not the scale of talent, but really good talent. We've got great institutions, we've got lots of capital. I mean, Singapore obviously has one of the highest FDIs into Singapore and out of Singapore, right? So there's no doubt about that. I don't see a lot of Singapore companies going straight with global scale, right? I mean, they start with Singapore, regional, and I think that becomes very limiting because unfortunately, the reality is that the money follows exits and where people can actually, investors can come in and exit, right? That's why they put in money. And exits will come when they see that scale. I've heard you speak at a few events and you've talked about this, right? And
I'm consistent if nothing else, right?
Yeah, no, you are. And you know what? I actually wrote an article on innovation from Singapore and this was a few months ago and it was published somewhere and I actually put a reference to you in that in terms of, and one of the things that I talked about also is in Silicon Valley, I think one of the things that actually sets it apart, it's not the infrastructure, you're right, it's not the infrastructure, it's not the support structure, it's really that ability to be able to wear a badge of honor even if you failed.
Especially because you failed.
Absolutely.
No VC will invest in somebody that hasn't already been scarred because the VC will know, I don't want to invest in you until I know you've been beaten to death a few times, in which case now I'm investing in somebody that has a more clear understanding of what it takes. So a lot of the people with whom we work in Singapore came from somewhere to do their PhD and some of their science research, so we consider that as an asset of Singapore. So whether a citizen or not is agnostic for us. We don't think about that. Is this an asset of Singapore? So the intellectual capital, the research, what happened, the origination, that's what we want to be a part of. And so for us, it's just a matter of, is this person ambitious and is this person capable? Yeah. You can be one or the other. Not a lot of people are both. And then what we want to do is wrap around them and try and be useful to them in any way we can.
That's right. You, of course, spend a lot more time with entrepreneurs than we do, but we see a lot of entrepreneurs in the fintech space. We see a lot trying to do stuff in blockchain, and it's. I do think it's changing in Singapore. Singapore's always been a great place for everyone to come and be here. You build your global MNC regional hub here, and you create all of this. You create employment, you create good lifestyle for people and stuff. But I think people are also realizing that you can actually leverage that and do something more with it.
Every country goes through this, right? The United States went through and is going through its own crisis, but the idea was build, right? The risk, it's worth it, quote unquote, and now there's a lot of concern about too much comfort and not enough appetite. That's why The United States, as a general statement, is not entrepreneurial. If you take a look at every man, woman, and child, there are pockets. You can go to Boston, Massachusetts for life sciences. You can go to San Francisco. You can go to Austin, Texas. You can go to Manhattan. But it's not like, the entire United States is some magical ecosystem of entrepreneurship. Same with the United Kingdom. There's pockets. Same with Israel. Same with every country. So our goal is not for every man, woman, and child in Singapore to be, an entrepreneur in waiting. It's if somebody has the capability and the passion, how can we help them express that? And almost inevitably, every scientist with whom we work will say some version of, I'm pretty good in this domain, but I don't know how to build a company. And our answer is, well, we're the other side of that equation, right? We're not here to improve your science. You've spent X number of years in that, but we know something about building a company. So let's work together. We don't end up with programs. We don't end up saying, fill in these forms and we'll give you this amount of money and hope for the best. We have a very significant intervention where we sit down and say, let's start right from the beginning. What were you hoping to solve with this research? How can we apply that in a meaningful way? How big is that market? Not Singapore, how big is that market? How can we help you get to that market? What investors do you need? And so on. So we spend a lot of time, and we'll spend literally hundreds of person hours trying to think that through together with the scientist. Then we activate our network, call other investors. We just met with a major corporation this morning and said, we have some ideas of scientists that we would like to bring to you that are working these projects. Are you open to that? And many corporations will say, I'd love to do something with innovation, but what they really mean is they really mean sort of a fancy procurement process. What we say is, no, we're bringing you semi-formed, imperfectly made raw material. If you want to be a part of that, you can really differentiate yourself as a company. But if what you mean is bring me a company that has 28 customers already, then you don't actually mean you want to work with a startup. You want to work with a small company. And that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of, to use a Peter Thiel expression, the 0 to 1. There wasn't something, now there is something. That's what we try to do.